The early morning mist draped itself over the winding river of Willow Bend, its surface shimmering like liquid silver under the first rays of dawn. Ellen Carter, a widow in her 60s with silver hair tied loosely in a braid, walked the familiar path from her weathered farmhouse to the riverbank, her wicker fishing basket swinging gently at her side. The air carried the crisp scent of damp earth and cottonwood leaves, a quiet symphony that had grounded her for decades on this land her great-grandparents claimed in the 1870s. The riverbank, fringed with tall grasses and shaded by ancient trees, was more than a fishing spot. It was a sanctuary where she felt her late husband's presence, his memory woven into every ripple of the water. Her boots crunched softly on the gravel path, each step a ritual of peace, until she rounded the bend and froze. A chain-link gate, its steel bars gleaming with fresh paint, blocked her way, a jarring intruder in the natural landscape. Bolted to its frame was a bold sign, Willow Bend HOA, Community Waterfront, Permit Required. Ellen's heart thudded, a calm shattered by a wave of disbelief and anger. She stepped closer, her fingers brushing the cold metal, tracing the words on the sign as if they might vanish under her touch. The notice, laminated and taped below, demanded a waterfront access permit and warned of fines for unauthorized use. The audacity of it burned in her chest like a coal. This was her riverbank, her family's legacy, carved out when her great-grandfather dammed a creek to secure water for crops and cattle. The deed, locked in a cedar chest in her farmhouse, predated the Willow Bend HOA by over a century. The HOA's manicured lawns and cookie-cutter houses stopped a mile away, their rules irrelevant to her 15 acres of fields and forest. Yet here was this gate, a blatant claim on her land, as if history could be rewritten with a sign and a chain. Ellen's eyes narrowed, her gaze sweeping the riverbank's edge where the cottonwoods stood like sentinels, their roots deep in the soil her family had tilled. The gate's steel bars clashed with the organic beauty of the river, its metallic sheen an insult to the wild grasses swaying in the breeze. She remembered her husband Tom, casting his line here, teaching their children to fish, his laughter echoing across the water. This wasn't just land, it was a promise, a piece of her heart. The HOA had no right, no legal standing to lock her out. Her pulse quickened, not with fear, but with a fierce resolve to protect what was hers. She turned back toward the farmhouse, her steps quickening, when the low hum of an engine broke the morning's quiet. A shiny silver sedan rolled to a stop on the other side of the gate, its polished surface reflecting the rising sun like a mirror. Claudia Vance, the HOA president, stepped out, her tailored navy blazer and sleek ponytail radiating an air of unearned authority. Her arms were crossed, her posture rigid, as if she owned not just the gate, but the river itself. Claudia's eyes glinted with a smug certainty, her presence a silent declaration of victory. She didn't approach the gate, didn't need to. Her stance alone was a challenge, a dare for Ellen to defy her. Ellen's hands tightened on her basket, her knuckles whitening. She knew Claudia's type. People who thrived on control, who saw rules as weapons to bend others to their will. The HOA had moved into Willow Bend 5 years ago, transforming open fields into a gated subdivision. But Ellen's land had always been a holdout, a stubborn relic of a freer time. Claudia's sedan idled, its engine a low growl as she cast one last glance at Ellen before climbing back inside. The vehicle pulled away, leaving a faint cloud of dust that mingled with the mist. Ellen stood alone, the gate shadow stretching across the gravel like a scar. Her mind raced, piecing together the implications. This wasn't just about access. It was about power, about Claudia trying to erase a century of Carter family history with a single act of bureaucratic overreach. Ellen's resolve hardened, her grief for Tom sharpened into a steely determination. She would not let this stand. The farmhouse loomed in the distance, its weathered boards a testament to her family's endurance.
Inside, the cedar chest held the proof she needed, documents that would expose Claudia's lie. As she walked back, the river's gentle murmur seemed to whisper encouragement, urging her to fight. The date might block her path today, but Ellen Carter was no stranger to battles, and this one was just beginning. She reached the porch, her fishing basket set aside, and paused to look back at the river. The mist was lifting, revealing the water's clarity, its surface unbroken except for the faint ripples of a trout breaking the surface. The sight grounded her, a reminder of why this land mattered. Claudia's gait was a challenge, but Ellen had faced worse: droughts, floods, the loss of Tom, and emerged stronger. She'd call her nephew Ryan, a young man with a new role that might turn the tide. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the valley, and Ellen felt a fire kindling in her chest. This was her riverbank, her legacy, and no HOA sign would steal it from her. As she stepped inside, the weight of the fight settled on her shoulders, but also the strength of her ancestors, ready to guide her forward.
The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains of Ellen Carter's farmhouse in Willow Bend, casting soft patterns across the worn oak table where she sat. Her hand steadied despite the fire burning in her chest. The chain-link gate blocking her riverbank, stamped with the Willow Bend HOA's audacious community waterfront sign, lingered in her mind like a fresh wound. The river, its cottonwood-lined banks a sanctuary for her family since the 1870s, was no one's to claim but hers. The HOA's laminated notice demanding a permit and threatening fines lay crumpled on the table, a paper tyrant she refused to bow to. Ellen's silver braid glinted as she opened a cedar chest in the living room, its hinges creaking with the weight of history. Inside, a leather-bound folder held the family's legacy: deeds, maps, and water rights documents from 1878, when her great-grandfather dammed a creek to secure the riverbank for crops and cattle. Each yellowed page was a shield, its faded ink a testament to the Carter family's unyielding claim. Ellen's fingers traced the delicate lines of a hand-drawn map, the river's curve marked as Carter's Bend, a name etched into county records long before the HOA's manicured lawns crept into Willow Bend. The documents detailed water rights granted to her ancestors, rights that predated the subdivision by over a century. The farmhouse, with its creaking floorboards and the faint scent of wood smoke, felt like a fortress holding these truths. Ellen's late husband, Tom, had loved this river, teaching their children to cast lines under the cottonwoods, their laughter blending with the water's murmur. The gate wasn't just a barrier, it was an attempt to erase that history, to steal the peace Ellen clung to in her widowhood. Her resolve hardened, the grief in her heart sharpening into a fierce determination to protect what was hers. She reached for the phone, dialing her nephew Ryan, a lanky 25-year-old who'd returned to Willow Bend after earning a degree in environmental science. Ryan had just been appointed the county's river conservation officer, a role that carried weight in these waterways. His pickup truck rumbled into the gravel driveway by noon, its tires kicking up dust that settled like a challenge. Ryan's face, tanned from days on the river, lit up as he studied the documents Ellen spread across the table. The deed's boundaries were clear, the water rights ironclad, and his new authority as a conservation officer gave him a unique edge. He recognized the power in these pages, not just legal, but personal. A link to the great-grandfather he'd heard stories about, a man who tamed the wilderness with grit and vision. Ellen watched Ryan's eyes spark with purpose, knowing he'd be her ally in this fight. They drove to the county records office, a squat brick building where the air smelled of old paper and bureaucracy. Mrs. Tate, a clerk with a memory sharper than her bifocals, greeted her with a knowing smile. She'd seen disputes like this before, HOAs overstepping into private lands.
As Ellen explained the gate and the HOA's claim, Mrs. Tate's brow furrowed, and she disappeared into the archives, returning with certified copies of the 1878 deed and a water rights agreement from 1880. She leaned closer, her voice low, sharing a rumor that sent a chill through Ellen. Claudia Vance, the HOA president, had been meeting with a developer eyeing the river for luxury condos. The community waterfront claim was a ploy to pressure Ellen into selling, a scheme to turn her family's legacy into profit. Ellen's jaw tightened, her hands clutching the certified documents like a weapon. Back at the farmhouse, Ryan grabbed his surveying kit and they walked to the riverbank under a blazing midday sun. He planted bright yellow flags along the property line, each one marking the boundary detailed in the deed, proving the gate stood illegally on Carter land. The river sparkled behind them, its gentle ripples a stark contrast to the steel gate's cold intrusion. Ellen stood by, her wicker basket a quiet symbol of her defiance, as Ryan's flags dotted the bank like sentinels. The work was methodical, each flag a stake in their fight, but the air felt heavy with anticipation. As they finished, Claudia's silver sedan cruised slowly past, her silhouette visible through the tinted windows, her gaze a cold calculation. Ellen's pulse quickened, sensing the storm brewing. Claudia wasn't just fighting for control, she was fighting for money, and that made her dangerous. Ellen and Ryan returned to the farmhouse, the folder of documents heavier now with certified weight. The river's murmur drifted through the open windows, a reminder of what was at stake. Ellen's mind churned with strategy. She knew Claudia wouldn't back down from a few flags or old papers. The HOA's rules, enforced with fines and threats, had cowed neighbors for years, but Ellen was no stranger to standing firm. She thought of Tom, his steady hand guiding hers as they fished, and felt his strength in her bones. Ryan, too, carried that legacy, his badge a modern echo of their family's grit. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the cottonwoods, Ellen felt a fire kindling within her. The gate might stand today, but with Ryan's authority and the document truth, she was ready to tear it down. Claudia's sedan lingered in her mind, a promise of escalation, but Ellen Carter was prepared to meet it head-on. Her riverbank worth every ounce of fight.
The midday sun hung high over Willow Bend, its golden rays dancing across the river's surface, where dragonflies skimmed and cottonwoods swayed in a gentle breeze. Ellen Carter stood on her private riverbank, her wicker fishing basket at her side, casting a line into the water with the steady rhythm of a ritual that anchored her to this land. The chain-link gate, illegally erected by the Willow Bend HOA and stamped with its smug community waterfront sign, loomed a few yards away, a steel scar on her family's legacy. The certified deeds and water rights from 1878, secured with her nephew Ryan's help, rested safely in her farmhouse, proof that this riverbank belonged to the Carters, not the HOA's manicured empire a mile away. Ellen's silver braid caught the light as she reeled in her line, her heart steady but alert, the memory of Claudia Vance's smug sedan still burning in her mind. The peace of the moment shattered when a sheriff's SUV rolled down the gravel path, its blue lights flashing lazily, cutting through the river's quiet murmur like an unwelcome guest. Sheriff Harper, a grizzled man with deep-set eyes who'd known the Carter family for decades, stepped out, his boots crunching on the gravel with a reluctant weight. His face carried an apologetic frown, a sign he was here on duty, not desire. Ellen's pulse quickened, her ride pausing mid-cast as she spotted Claudia's silver sedan parked just beyond the gate, its driver's door ajar. Claudia stood nearby, her navy blazer pristine, her arms crossed, and her clipboard posture radiating the same smug authority she'd displayed days earlier. An anonymous complaint, undoubtedly Claudia's handiwork, had accused Ellen of illegal fishing and trespassing on community property, a baseless charge meant to intimidate. Ellen set her rod against the cottonwood, her hand steady despite the anger simmering in her chest, and approached the sheriff,
her steps deliberate, her eyes locked on his. She gestured to the yellow surveyor flags Ryan had planted, their bright tips marking the true boundary of her land, proving the gate's placement was a trespass. Harper's gaze followed her gesture, his brow furrowing as he took in the flag's alignment, each one a silent rebuke of the HOA's claim. The river's gentle ripples seemed to hold their breath as Harper walked the boundary, his boots brushing past wild grasses and his hand resting on his belt as he inspected the flags. Ellen handed him a copy of the 1878 deed, its certified stamp gleaming in the sunlight, and explained the riverbank's history, her great-grandfather's dam, the water rights, the land's independence from the HOA's reach. Harper's eyes softened, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. He'd fished this river as a boy, invited by Ellen's late husband Tom, and knew the Carter claim was no myth. Yet protocol bound him, and he noted the complaint's details. Alleged fishing without an HOA permit, a violation of shared waterfront rules. Claudia watched from her sedan, her clipboard clutched like a shield, her presence a silent glow, as if she'd already won. Harper's tone was measured and his words careful, but he warned Claudia that false reports carried consequences, his gaze lingering on her with a quiet authority that made her posture stiffen. Claudia's eyes narrowed, her lips tightened into a thin line, but she retreated to her sedan, her movement sharp, her confidence shaken. Ellen's heart pounded, a mix of relief and simmering dread. The sheriff's visit had been a formality, his familiarity with her family a quiet ally, but Claudia's retreat was no surrender. The anonymous complaint was a calculated jab, a test of Ellen's resolve, and her swift counter with the deed had held it at bay. For now, Ryan arrived, his pickup kicking up gravel, his river conservation officer badge catching the sun's glint. He joined Ellen by the riverbank, his presence a bolster of authority, and briefed Harper on the river's protected status under state environmental laws, which his role oversaw. The sheriff nodded, his face resolute, promising to monitor the situation and keep Claudia's complaints in check. He climbed back into his SUV, the engine's low rumble fading as he drove off, leaving the gate shadow stretching across the gravel. Ellen stood by the river, her fishing basket a quiet symbol of her defiance, as Ryan checked his surveyor flags, ensuring each one stood firm. The water's murmur resumed, a soothing backdrop to the tension still crackling in the air. Claudia's sedan lingered in Ellen's mind, its silver gleam a promise of retaliation. The sheriff's visit had been a victory, a crack in the Willow Bend HOA's armor, but Claudia's greed and pride wouldn't let her stop. The developer's condo scheme, whispered by Mrs. Tate at the records office, loomed as the true motive behind the gate, a plan to pressure Ellen into selling her riverbank for profit. Ellen's resolve deepened. Her connection to Tom's memory and her ancestors' labor fueled her strength. Ryan's badge and the documents were powerful tools, but Claudia's next move would be bolder, more desperate. Ellen's farmhouse stood in the distance, its weathered boards a fortress of history, and she knew the fight was far from over. As the sun climbed higher, casting golden light across the cottonwoods, Ellen felt the river's pulse, a reminder of what she stood to lose and what she was ready to defend with every ounce of her grit.
The afternoon sun bathed Willow Bend in a golden haze, its light filtering through the towering cottonwoods that lined Ellen Carter's private riverbank, casting dappled shadows across the gravel path leading to her farmhouse. The chain-link gate, illegally erected by the Willow Bend HOA and emblazoned with its smug community waterfront sign, stood as a lingering insult, its steel bars glinting defiantly in the daylight. Ellen's heart still carried the sting of Sheriff Harper's visit, prompted by Claudia Vance's baseless complaint of illegal fishing and trespassing, a complaint that crumbled under the weight of her 1878 deed and her nephew Ryan's authority as the county's river conservation officer. The certified documents, secured from the county records office, and Ryan's surveyor flags marking the Carter land's boundaries had held Claudia at bay. But Ellen knew the HOA president's retreat was temporary.
Claudia's silver sedan and her navy blazer were symbols of a greed-driven scheme, one tied to a developer's plan to turn the river into a luxury condo access, and Ellen sensed the fight was about to escalate. As Ellen sat on her porch, the river's gentle murmur a steady undercurrent to her thoughts, a new HOA letter arrived, delivered by a courier who avoided her gaze. The paper, crisp with official letterhead, demanded $500 in fines for unpermitted river use and threatened a lien on her property if she didn't comply within a week. The audacity of the demand ignited a fire in her chest, her fingers crumpling the edges of the letter. Claudia wasn't just pushing boundaries, she was trying to choke Ellen's legacy out of existence. Ellen's silver braid caught the breeze as she stood, her resolve hardening like the cottonwood roots embedded in the riverbank. She called Ryan, whose pickup arrived within an hour, his conservation officer badge a quiet emblem of their growing arsenal. Ryan's eyes, sharp with purpose, scanned the letter, and he suggested a bold move: rally the neighbors, many of whom had suffered under Claudia's iron-fisted HOA rules, to form a united front against her overreach. Ellen and Ryan invited Sarah, a baker who'd been fined for her unapproved backyard garden, and Old Man Tate, a farmer harassed for his tractor's noise, to the farmhouse. The kitchen filled with the scent of fresh coffee as they gathered around the oak table, the certified deeds and water rights spread out like battle plans. Sarah shared a damning piece of evidence, an email from Claudia to an HOA board member hinting at a developer offering millions for riverfront access, with Ellen's land as the key. The gate, the fines, the complaints, all were steps to pressure Ellen into selling, to turn her family's riverbank into a profitable thoroughfare. Old Man Tate's weathered hands clenched, his own battles with Claudia fueling his support. The group agreed to canvass Willow Bend, seeking signatures for a petition to challenge the HOA's claim and demand Claudia's removal as president. Ellen and Sarah knocked on doors, their footsteps echoing through the subdivision's manicured streets where neatly trimmed lawns hid simmering resentment. Neighbors shared stories of Claudia's tyranny, fines for non-compliant mailboxes, demands to repaint sheds, threats over children's chalk drawings. Young families, retirees, and farmers added their names to the petition, their signatures a quiet rebellion against the HOA's overreach. Ryan, meanwhile, met with a local lawyer, Margaret, whose office smelled of leather and ink. She reviewed the deeds and Ryan's conservation reports, her eyes gleaming as she drafted a cease and desist letter, demanding the gate's removal and citing the HOA's illegal trespass. Ellen and Ryan returned to the riverbank, hammering the letter onto the steel frame under the fading sun, its words a legal gauntlet thrown in Claudia's face. The river sparkled behind them, its ripples a testament to the land's enduring freedom. But Claudia's sedan cruised by the gate again, her silhouette a dark promise of retaliation. The farmhouse became a hub of resistance, its porch crowded with neighbors dropping by to sign the petition or share their own HOA grievances. Mrs. Larson, a widow fined for her rose trellis, brought homemade jam, her gratitude evident in her firm signature. Young Tim, a mechanic harassed for his parking work truck, offered to spread the word among the younger residents. The petition grew thick with names, a collective roar of defiance that Evan hadn't expected but welcomed like a lifeline. Ryan's surveyor flag stood firm along the riverbank, each one a marker of truth against Claudia's lies. The community's support felt like a shield, wrapping around Ellen's resolve, her connection to her late father Tom's strengthening with every name added. The cottonwood whispered in the evening breeze, their leaves catching the last light as Ellen stood by the river, her wicker basket a symbol of her unyielding claim. Claudia's sedan slowed by the gate again, her gaze cold through the tinted windows, a storm brewing in her silence. Ellen's pulse quickened, sensing the HOA president's desperation. The developer's millions hung in the balance, and Claudia's pride wouldn't let her back down. The cease and desist letter was a bold strike, but Ellen knew it would provoke a fiercer response. The farmhouse loomed behind her, its weathered boards a fortress of history, and Ryan's bat an echo of their family's grit. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the riverbank, Ellen felt the weight of the fight, but also the strength of her allies. The river's murmur urged her forward, a reminder that this land was worth every battle, and Claudia's next move would test their resolve like never before.
The early morning air hung crisp over Willow Bend, the river's surface reflecting a pale pink dawn as it wound through Ellen Carter's private riverbank, its cottonwood-lined banks alive with the soft hum of waking wildlife. The chain-link gate, illegally erected by the Willow Bend HOA and stamped with its brazen community waterfront sign, stood as a steel affront to her family's century-old legacy. Ellen's heart still thrummed with a fire of resistance, fueled by the community alliance she and her nephew Ryan had forged. Neighbors like Sarah and Old Man Tate united by a petition against Claudia Vance's overreach. The sheriff's visit, sparked by Claudia's baseless complaint, had been rebuffed by certified deeds from 1878 and Ryan's authority as the county's river conservation officer. But the new HOA letter, demanding $500 in fines and threatening a lien, had escalated the fight. Ellen stood on her porch, her silver braid catching the morning light, when she noticed the gate had been reinforced overnight. A heavier chain now locked it, and a new sign screamed, "Trespassers prosecuted." Claudia's audacity was a slap, and Ellen's resolve hardened like the riverbed stone. Ryan arrived in his pickup, his conservation officer badge glinting with purpose, his face set with the same stubborn grit Ellen remembered in her late husband, Tom. The new HOA notice, slipped into her mailbox at dawn, threatened to seize her riverbank for non-compliance. A desperate move tied the Claudia's developer scheme to profit from the river. Ryan's role gave him state-backed authority over waterways, and he devised a plan to assert it. He loaded his truck with official gear, survey tools, water testing kits, and a state-issued logbook, and drove to the riverbank, where Ellen joined him, her wicker fishing basket a quiet symbol of defiance. Neighbors began to gather, drawn by the rumble of Ryan's truck. Sarah with her phone out, filming for evidence. Old Man Tate his weathered face alight with defiance. And others, like Mrs. Larson and young Tim, their eyes wide with the anticipation. The yellow surveyor flags Ryan had planted stood firm, marking the Carter land's boundaries, each one a testament to the gate's illegality. The tension thickened as Ryan began a formal river inspection, his movements deliberate as he tested water samples and logged notes, his badge a shield against HOA rules. The river sparkled behind him, its ripples catching the dawn's glow, a stark contrast to the gate's cold steel. Ellen stood nearby, her hand steady, watching the crowd grow, their phones capturing the scene like a brewing storm. Claudia's silver sedan screeched to a halt beyond the gate, its polished surface glinting like a predator's hide. She stepped out, her navy blazer sharp against the rural backdrop, her clipboard clutched like a weapon, her posture radiating fury. Her eyes narrowed as she took in Ryan's official gear, her confidence shaken, but her resolve unbroken. The air crackled with anticipation, the neighbors' murmurs a quiet roar of support, as Ryan continued his work, undeterred, his logbook entries a legal rebuke of Claudia's claims. Sheriff Harper's SUV rolled up, with its lights flashing lazily, summoned by Claudia's latest complaint of obstructing community access. Harper, a grizzled ally who'd fished this river with Tom years ago, stepped out, his face calm but firm. Ellen handed him the certified deed and Ryan's conservation reports, her hand steady as she pointed to the surveyor flags. Ryan stepped forward, his badge gleaming, and explained the river's protected status under state environmental law, which his role enforced. The gate, he noted, violated Carter property rights and obstructed his official duties, a charge that carried legal weight. Harper's eyes scanned the documents, his nod slow but resolute, and he turned to Claudia, his presence a quiet dismantling of her authority. The sheriff's inspection of the flags confirmed the gate's trespass, and he ordered the chain unlocked, citing county law. Claudia's haze paled, her clipboard trembling in her grip as the crowd's phones captured her retreat, their lent as a silent jury. The chain fell with a heavy clank, the gate swinging open under Harper's command, and a ripple of cheers broke from the neighbors. Ellen's heart swelled, not just from relief, but with the power of community, their support a shield around her riverbank. Ryan continued his inspection, his logbook a weapon of truth, while Sarah's footage spread among the neighbors, a digital testament to their defiance. Claudia climbed into her sedan, her eyes burning with a mix of fury and desperation, her developer dreams slipping further away. The river's murmur resumed, its gentle flow a reminder of what Ellen fought for: Tom's memory, her ancestors' labor, the land's quiet freedom. The gate stood open, its power broken, but Ellen knew Claudia's pride would drive her to strike back harder. Ryan's authority had shifted the battle, and the neighbors' alliance was a growing force, but the war wasn't over. As the sun climbed higher, casting golden light across the cottonwoods, Ellen felt the river's pulse, a call to stand firm. The farmhouse loomed in the distance, its weathered boards a fortress of history, and Ellen's resolve burned brighter, ready for the final fight.
The late afternoon sun cast a golden sheen over Willow Bend, its rays weaving through the cottonwoods that stood sentinel along Ellen Carter's private riverbank, their leaves shimmering like a promise kept. The river's gentle ripples reflected the fading light, a serene contrast to the chain-link gate that had once blocked her family's century-old legacy, its steel bars and community waterfront sign now a fading memory after the dramatic standoff that saw Sheriff Harper order its chain unlocked. Ellen's heart still thrummed with the fire of resistance, fueled by the alliance of neighbors, Sarah, Old Man Tate, Mrs. Larson, and young Tim, who had rallied behind her and her nephew Ryan, the county's river conservation officer. The certified 1878 deeds, Ryan's surveyor flags, and his state-backed authority had dismantled Claudia Vance's baseless claim, exposing her developer-driven scheme to seize the riverbank for luxury condos. Yet Claudia's desperation lingered, her silver sedan a specter of retaliation, and Ellen knew the fight would culminate in a final battle. The Willow Bend Town Hall loomed ahead, its weathered brick facade a stage for the public hearing that would decide the riverbank's fate, and Ellen stood ready, her silver braid catching the light, her wicker fishing basket a quiet emblem of her defiance. The town hall buzzed with anticipation, its wooden rafters echoing the murmurs of a packed crowd, neighbors, farmers, and subdivision residents drawn by the growing rebellion against the HOA's overreach. Ellen stood at the back, her weathered hands clutching a folder of documents, deeds, water rights, Ryan's conservation reports, and the cease and desist letter that had shaken Claudia's resolve. Ryan stood beside her, his badge gleaming, his face set with the same grit that had carried them through the standoff. The council table at the front held a mix of HOA loyalists and neutral locals, their faces tense as Claudia sat among them, her navy blazer stiff, her posture rigid, but her eyes betraying a flicker of unease. Ellen stepped forward, her boots echoing on the creaky floor, and laid out the evidence with methodical precision. The 1878 deed, its certified stamp bold, outlined the Carter family's ownership of the riverbank, predating the HOA by over a century. Ryan's reports detailed the river's protected status under state law, his authority as conservation officer trumping Claudia's rules. Sarah followed, presenting the petition, its pages thick with dozens of signatures from neighbors fed up with HOA fines and threats. The room stirred, murmurs rippling as Ellen revealed the leaked email Sarah had uncovered, exposing Claudia's ties to a developer who saw the riverbank as a gateway to millions in condo profits. The council's faces hardened, their eyes narrowing at Claudia, whose clipboard lay useless, her smugness crumbling under the weight of truth. Ellen's heart pounded, not with fear, but with the strength of her ancestors, her great-grandfather's dam, her husband Tom's laughter by the river, fueling her resolve. The petition's signatures, from young Tim's bold scrawl to Old Man Tate's shaky hand, were a collective roar, a community no longer cowed by Claudia's tyranny. Ryan's conservation reports added legal firepower, proving the gate's placement violated state waterway regulations, a charge that could bring fines or worse for the HOA. The council deliberated, their voices low, as Claudia's face paled,
her fingers gripping the table's edge, her empire unraveling with each passing minute. The verdict came swiftly. The gate was illegal, the HOA's claim baseless, and Claudia's actions a clear overstep. The council ordered the gate's immediate removal and voted to remove Claudia as HOA president, her developer scheme collapsing under public scrutiny. The crowd erupted in quiet cheers, neighbors exchanging nods of relief and triumph. Ellen's chest swelled with a mix of pride and peace, the riverbank's freedom secured not just by documents, but by the community's courage. The developer's shadow was gone, Claudia's power broken, and the riverbank stood as a symbol of resilience. The farmhouse loomed behind, its weathered boards a fortress of history, and Ellen felt a deep contentment, knowing the river would flow free for generations. As the stars emerged, their light dancing on the water, Willow Bend felt whole again, its heart restored by a widow's grit and a community's strength.